Let's see if we can't get this BoomCo blaster up to snuff. Mod guide, go! So cracking this shell was a real pain. The entire rotating cylinder mechanism pulls out. You can see more or less how this is functioning, as well as its engagement point here, which locks into this so that you're always aligned. You can see exactly how this works. We have this trigger. It is a cherry style switch or a lever switch, and it looks like they're using a much thicker gauge of wire than standard Nerf stuff, so that's actually nicer than Hasbro's manufacturing. That said, there are also still just a whole bunch of locks in this blaster, so we have to engage this, and then you can see that pulling this trigger back engages our little flipper. Interesting that they use a reset on a mechanism like this instead of just a hard reset, but everything is working on an extension spring, which is nice, with the exception of this compression spring working the trigger mechanism itself. We have the entire rotating axle here. There's a technical engineering term for this, but it slipped my mind at the moment. And then over here we have what's very interesting, which is, it appears to be standard 130 size flywheel motors, which is excellent. It means that all Nerf brand replacements will work. We can get high torque motors for these very, very simply. We also have just a ton of nonsense soldered onto a board here, so we'll want to remove those. And then that's kind of fascinating that there's this like little rubber coating on this motor, so let's pop that next, and you can see this is a SMC motor. Can't make out this. This is our cathode anode designations here, and then we have some like leftover. Why is this in here? That's very strange. I'm singing your praises, Mattel, for your manufacturing, and then there's just random like solder slipped in here, and then some very poor soldering over here. It looks like they were trying to ground the motor and did a very sloppy job of that, but all in all, that's worth knowing. I will be removing this flywheel cage entirely once I get all of these locks figured and removed. It's slightly annoying that the battery compartment makes it so that it's impossible to butterfly this without keeping it connected. So everything is very much so tethered, and that's a pain, but what can you do? So I'm going to go ahead and start removing some of these mechanical locks, and then I'll get back to you with the electronics. So while you can see that the torque that these exert by gripping with this rubber on the flywheels, gripping rubber on rubber tip and throwing it forward, is vastly superior to the grip that Nerf flywheels get, these flywheel systems are insanely heavy, much heavier than Nerf flywheels, which explains why they're getting such poor RPMs and therefore not the kind of performance that I expect out of an Elite flywheel. I don't have a way to make these lightweight without fooling with them too terribly much, and for the purpose of this mod guide, I think that it's irrelevant since I'm going to just overvolt these motors into behaving. But I did go ahead and remove that entire ceramic board, so I will be coming in and cleaning that up first, but then I'll resolder in some clean leads and then attach those to the original wire. The wire that the Twisted Spinner is using is slightly thicker than Nerf gauge wire, but much smaller than this stuff, which is the 18 gauge that I use for my modifications. So should be somewhere in between. I imagine that it'll handle everything fine. If it doesn't handle everything fine, I'll come back and make an addendum to this mod guide. As always, I want to do one quick polarity check. So we've got cathode anode hooked up. The LiPo here is just substituting for our battery tray. And then although my wires are discombobulated, you can tell that we have cathode in the front, anode in the back. And we're going to go ahead and feed this BoomCo dart through. And that is why we test, because it appears to be not going in the correct direction. So we will go ahead and swap these. Now hopefully, bingo, exactly what we want. So now we can solder and lock down the things in the correct polarity and everything should be good to go. So I could not find much in the way of troublesome mechanical locks, so I completely removed this switch, so there's no longer an electronic lock. This blaster will rev at all times when it is being revved. No worries about flipping through and losing any of your momentum. I also completely streamlined the circuit. You can see that here, so that it is now completely ready for an overvoltage, however I choose to go about that. I've been using a LiPo for testing, but I think that IMRs will be fine for this purpose to prevent me from having to mess with the tray. So I ended up finding some mechanical locks that bothered me after all. These were slowing down my rate of fire, so I'm going to remove both Phillips head screws and gut them completely out. That should be the last modification before I go to the final firing demo. Alright guys, so this is the final segment for the mod guide for the BoomCo Spinsanity, and now that it's been overvolted to, I want to say 12 point some odd volts here, it's really getting like in-strike elite style performance, which is where it should have been in the first place, but now it's got some real pomp and circumstance to it and becomes an effective primary if BoomCo darts are your slinging style of choice. So let's rev it up. Not many in this second cylinder, but we'll fire those. And it's of note that these are fishtailing just a little bit. Lower voltages might be more ideal for a blaster like this, but I wanted to get the balance right, and I still don't think I quite have it, but the performance speaks for itself. I'm shooting at a target. If I were to shoot for distance, I think we'd easily be getting those elite ranges that I was mentioning. In fact, we'll... Yeah, certainly. And so that's firing at a very reasonable rate. Notable features for this blaster are that once it's been overvolted, this trigger return here, where it snaps back into position on the back part there without having to come forward, really comes into play. You can keep up with your rate of fire once you don't have to wait for the lag time in the flywheel, since they're just going and going and going. I've experienced very little motor issues using the stock motors. They seem solid for me at this voltage level. I don't want to take them higher than this because I don't think that there would be any performance gains of note from that, but all in all, I think that this was a solid set of modifications. The removal of the physical locks makes it a much smoother blaster, and then the performance increases and streamlining of the circuit obviously lend to much more powerful ranges and distance, those are the same. Anyway, that's my mod guide for this. I hope you found it helpful. If you do want one of these but don't want to do the modification guides yourself, I will be selling this blaster on eBay, link in the description box below, simply because I have nobody to sling BoomCo darts with. The SE&C is nerf or nothing, and so I would not want to use this blaster personally, but if you have people to play BoomCo style scenarios with, you are more than welcome to purchase it, and as always, thanks for watching.